Good morning! You're listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs. This is where I speak to bands and artists about the jobs they've had between making records, between going on tours, all that free time to try and recoup the money they've spent playing music and making records and going on tours, how they've been able to do that, stories of casual employment, precarious employment. That's why I'm here, that's what I'm trying to do, and that's my job. On today's episode, Tom Rees from Buzzard Buzzard Buzzard, amazing band with style from Cardiff. Their album Backhand Deals came out early this year. Saw them a few times last year and blew me away every time. Just sounded amazing. I can't wait to see them again. They're playing a few shows supporting Stereophonics in Cardiff later this month, and then Le Pub in Newport, so a bit of a Wales blush for them. Might have to make the trip down. This episode is supported by 2000 Trees Festival, taking place from the 6th to the 9th of July in Cheltenham, just a few hours away from London. Idols, Jimmy Eat World, Thrice and Turnstile will be headlining. 2000 Trees is one of the biggest independent rock festivals in the UK. They even won an award for it at some point. You can go to their website to see the full lineup, 2000treesfestival.co.uk. But there are so many amazing bands playing. High Viz, Kneecap, Get Up Kids, Stick to Your Guns, Cheerbleeders, Laura Jane Grace, Bob Villain. There's loads of great stuff on there. And if you want to go but haven't yet got your ticket, you can get 10% off that ticket. That will save you about 20 quid. Just use the voucher code 101POD. That's 101POD to get 10% off and enjoy yourself that weekend. Cheers for listening to 101 Part-Time Jobs. This is Thomas Rees of Buzzard Buzzard Buzzard, whose new album Backhand Deals is a brilliant listen. Go well. Cheers! Wait, so being from Wales, being from Cardiff, I feel like, one of the first things you learn about the Manics is like how hard they worked. And how they took their education into their own hands. And how like they were smart. And I wonder if that like did that, this is a podcast about jobs. I want to hear about funny stories. I want to hear about the shitty stories. I want to hear about the good stories. I want to hear about how probably everyone's still working now, even though tours are going really well and records are going well, But I think that's my first proper question. Is it like learning how to play music and learning you're playing gigs and, sometimes you got to ask quite strongly to get paid and, you kind of got to be serious about the fun. I mean, thinking about that stuff, where do you weigh in on that? And, how do you talk to friends or family about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's always kind of a tricky one, really, because I think everybody, especially in the friends and family realm, like everybody has this kind of perception that we've quote unquote made it, which is absolutely not the case. But I'm glad that they think that, because they hold a higher sort of social opinion of me, and they grant me things, they give me things, you know what I mean, which is nice, that normally I wouldn't get if I didn't have such a esteemed social status with my own parents. But I think like that kind of thing is skewed, and the observation I think with bands and stuff is, or my observation anyway, is that everybody has a perception of how big you are, and when you announce something sort of huge, like for example, if we were going to support the Manic Street Preachers somewhere, then people would have this perception that, oh, they've made it, they've done it, they're great, they've made it, that's all cool. And you, through that process, I think you actually get more engagement from people and more listeners and more people who are fans of the band, because they go along with this perception that you are this big thing. But in actual reality, I mean, like, I'm lucky enough to be a producer, like as my job, so that's great. I have a fantastic job, and I'm very lucky to be able to do it. So that 100% of the time, when I'm not fit in a kitchen, I'm just doing music. Do you know what I mean? But the rest of the guys, like Ed works for the BBC, probably not for long, eh? And
doing what?
He's a boom operator.
Excellent.
Yeah, and he on Casualty. He's like first boom op on Casualty.
Amazing.
And Zach works in a pub, and Ethan's a chef, So it's like, we all have...
It's almost like a music video.
Yeah, for sure. We all have these avenues, and we all have to work. Like, it's not a sustainable industry by any stretch of the imagination, but it is being sold as one, like the glitz and glamour element of it. It's kind of similar to how, like, my girlfriend's Portuguese, and she was like, the way that Britain is sold to people is that everyone's just like, from the home counties, sat around drinking tea, just like, you know, living like in a frock, just having a great time in a huge manor
I'm feeling
house.
personally attacked right now. Tom.
Yeah, absolutely, and you should be. This is directed entirely at you. But when she arrived in Cardiff, like, you know, they're all, you know, everybody coming down for a rugby day from the valleys is completely different. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like there's a similar perception there, my perception at least, in terms of how the music industry sells the idea of being in a band and sells the music, because it even sells the drudgery of it all. Like, it even sells the going around the country in an old van that keeps breaking down and you're just fucking pissing wet and you just want to go to bed and all that stuff. It's
music journalism trope, isn't it? You know, don't you remember, I think we're similar ages, like, don't you remember reading about and I put this in quote marks because I think it's absolute BS, the toilet circuit. Why was that romanticized? And also those venues that we're talking about, those venues that were being talked about were community hubs.
Absolutely.
Don't call them that.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they're under 150 cap. That's brilliant. That's my favorite gig.
Yeah, but again, I think that's all part of like glorifying the dirt of it all. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the thing, is that there has been a long-standing, and like, I was talking to a friend about this today, actually. There's been like a long-standing division between the people who make contributions to the culture of music in our country, especially in Wales as well. Obviously, there's like microcosms of the subject in every city, but in Cardiff, we have this particular removal from people who are in either publicly funded like musical societies and music labels, as opposed to like the venues, the bands who are contributing to the culture of the scene. Do you know what I mean? There seems to be a really clear divide between those two groups. And I think that's probably the same to be extrapolated across, with a few exceptions, of course. There are a lot of great people working in the music industry, but the people that are working in the music industry are usually predicating upon that divide. Do you know what I mean? But the sick part of it all, if I can keep going for one little bit more, the sick part of it all is that we have to indulge in it. Do you know what I mean? We have to do it because it's part of the industry, you know.
Don't really have a choice. That world of grants, those grants require application processes, which require you to be, you know, pretty brushed up on that stuff.
I think a lot of the cases with the sort of grant application thing as well, like the PRS and people like that, there are a lot of good institutions that do a lot of great work. And fortunately, we've been on the receiving end of some great applications, and we've been on the receiving end of being in the fortunate position of like knowing somebody there, knowing how to do applications, having a team around us to be able to do it. So I understand that the priority in the first instance is to do good work, and a lot of them do. But what happens in a lot of instances is that I think this is the same. Perhaps this is a similar problem for charities generally. I know I'm speaking really seriously. I should throw a joke in every now and again. But for charities more broadly, like, there are a lot of people who are trying to maintain a job. And so a lot of, you know, like, you're going into institutions where people need to keep jobs. And so a lot of the time, when you're talking about giving money to people who need it, a lot of the time, people who are in that job might say, well, if I give my money to that person, then what happens to my job? And I think that's kind of like a dangerous thing. But I don't know. Again, just a musician. I don't know the better way, you know. I don't know how to...
I mean, and that's brilliant, because I do like to think that, like, you know, I grew up playing in punk rock bands, and you know, you get to an age and learn about the Stooges and MC5, about how they had their own club, and you know, I like to think it was an inclusive club, but it was a club that was a bit like, fuck everybody else, we're going to do our thing. I think Against Me were the first band for me that was like that.
Right, okay.
But that, I mean, what bands? You know, I mean, I presume you've been playing music since a teenager. You shred like you've been playing for 30 years.
Stop it.
Do you remember a time where you thought about, you know, what your politics were going to be on what we're talking about?
Oh no, that's a very interesting question. But no, I don't think I ever had. I think what's important with with any of that sort of stuff, like politicking or the process of politics, is like, especially in music, is where you come from, and this sort of space that you form your musical opinion and your musical brain in. And I think Cardiff is like a really specific. I'm actually from Barry originally as well, so that's just like a town just outside of Cardiff. So it's kind of like very similar to like the kind of opinions that are held by bands who are perhaps like from the north of England or whatever. I'm sure it's unilateral across the whole place, but it's
of course,
there's kind of like
London nil, Hull 4.
Yeah, precisely. There's like a kind of like forgotten element in it. And when I was coming up and playing shows in Cardiff, I mean, I started playing shows when I was like 14, 15 in this like doom metal band with my friend Grant, and like when we were playing those shows, there was a lot of people like fleeing to London. Like the general environment was like, you got to get out of here, man. There's, you know, like you got to get to London. And there was no love of self. Do you know what I mean? There's no love of city. Right. There was no love of country. It was just like
nurture what you've got.
Yeah, it was kind of, well, it was just kind of like Cardiff's going to do nothing for you here. And there was that kind of, I kind of think that it was like that kind of lack of self-belief that has contributed to the position that we're in now. Do you know what I mean? I feel like our self-belief as a city has come a little bit too late, because in terms of what I think government or local council or whatever can do, it's kind of like screaming on one side of a ravine, do you know what I mean? And you hear the sound bounce back off. It's kind of like there's like a latency or a delay. So like the held opinion in Cardiff when I was coming up was like, you know, you just want to move somewhere else. Like all the cool Cymru guys did it, like Griff Rees and the Manics and all those people, Stereophonics, whatever. They all did it, and then it died a death because the 90s is over. So now it's just, you know, whatever. It's, you know, everything else that came around pre-2008, which is like hard finance, let's make money, art can go fuck itself, do you know what I mean? And I feel like we're in that sort of delayed phase now, where now in Cardiff especially, the Welsh government holds the opinion, oh wait, people don't care about music though, do you know what I mean? Because that's what they got the job on, was that very basis, and now they're closing down venues and all that sort of stuff. So it's, you know, it's pretty hard.
Ska punk was pretty rife in 2004 to 10.
Yeah.
Shooting Goon.
Yeah.
Were they from? Who was that band that's got to stay focused?
Oh, I got no idea. To be honest with you, man, when I hear ska, the aversion, it's like listening to ska for me is like having aversion therapy. It's like the last half an hour of Clockwork Orange for me. Like where he's like
Adequate Seven.
Yeah. Yeah. I worked in a bar called The Moon pretty much all the way from when I was like 17 till I was about 21, and every band that played in there was a ska band. No gas. I was like, where do these ska bands keep coming from? Like, I don't know where they keep coming. There must be like a ska hub of like, you know, like I can get along with like old school ska, you know, like the original stuff. That stuff I can get along with, but what are those guys who do like that cover of like Take On Me, but it's like a ska Real Big Fish. They can die a death, man. You know, I don't feel.
Hey, so you must have been learning about like how shows run, how like promoters, how there's someone on the door, how it works, how
for sure
the split gets worked. I mean, I always think, you know, so many people. I wonder if, you know, is that how you learn producing, by being there and watching it happen?
Yeah, I think that had played a part in it as well. It was like, from my perspective, when I was working in the bars and stuff, and when I was going to play gigs, I always just loved the recording element of it, because the gigs always felt, although they were great, when you sort of like made a bit of a splash and like people would come into the shows and that sort of thing, though they were really, really cool and really, really fun and really, really energetic. I was a drummer in that band, so I just felt like the lugging the stuff around and all that stuff was just like, it was a lot, do you know what I mean? And then, especially then, I was really young, so I was still really hungry for it and that sort of stuff, but like not getting paid. Door splits are just an awful concept, because it's just like, oh, sorry, we only had 8 people in, so you can't have anything. Sorry, thanks for coming all the way to Swansea, but I'm afraid we can't pay you anything. So I really enjoyed being in the studio. I really enjoyed like the camaraderie that you, like the rapport you develop with somebody else in the studio. It's always just like a really positive environment to be in, because you're going in with somebody specifically because of the reason that they like your music, or you want to work with them for any reason. So it's a really like positive and inspiring situation to be in. And being at those shows and seeing that you weren't making any money, I was like, look, I really love this. I really love the whole element of this, like playing and being in a band, but it needs to work. Like, unfortunately, we live in a society where, you know, everything is run by money. So I just need to have something. Like, it would either go down 2 roads, right? It would either be like, I get really, really, really good at drums and I can play in a wedding band, which is great, and you can make a lot of money doing that. Or I could veer off this way. I was really into IT and computers and stuff like that. So I was like really getting into that sort of stuff. So I was like, I could just look at the recording thing and make money that way. But I was like, straight down the middle, I don't think I can actually make a living, at least not for a very long time. Or, well, I could do it in a very cool way, in a very like kind of, who's the guy on the road, like on a Jack Kerouac kind of way,
yeah.
like
Singies in the morning.
Yeah, I'll be like famous after I die and all that stuff. Do you know what I mean? But like, that wasn't the really road for me. I like to shower, you know. I like.
So you were old enough at that point to be like, oh, you were paying rent. You know, you were like, I'm doing this thing. You weren't necessarily sleeping at friends' houses or someone else's house.
Yeah, no, I was in uni, so I was fortunate to be just jamming on a student loan. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, that seems quite a smart thing when you kind of get to that conversation where it's like, well, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And they're just like, I want to go on tour, man.
Yeah, it's just
I
like...
just want to go on tour.
Yeah.
It's like, no!
It's a great dream. It really is. And the feeling of doing it is amazing. And again, it's the same thing. The camaraderie, being with your best friends, hanging out with everybody, going to play shows, connecting with people. Like, I'm the most social I ever am when I'm on tour. Like, because I'm just surrounded by people and everything's great. But... yeah, I'm always stressing about money when I'm on tour because I just don't have any of it because you just burn through it so quick because the industry, again, is not weighted to support you whilst you're doing that. Do you know what I mean?
It's pretty sad being really far away in an amazing place and seeing a record that you want to buy and you're like, well, I don't have 25 quid.
I can't do it. And it's been worse than that. It's been like, I can't, like, oh, I'd really love a cheese sandwich. But it's like, I can't. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, it's really, really hard. And I think I was quite fortunate in a way. This is kind of like a fortune kind of like caveated with like a kind of sad reality. But like the guy I was in a band, we were like a two-piece when I started in a band with a guy called Grant Jones, who's a phenomenal guitarist. He's amazing. He's like literally the best guitarist I've ever seen in my life. And he was great in... taking me as quite an innocent young boy and like showing me the world of like a world of darkness. Do you know what I mean? Like introducing me to like real rock, like Sabbath and stuff like that. Because prior to that, I was just a clean little Beatles boy. Do you know what I mean? So he was really good at doing that. But what I saw, he was older than me. So he was like, I think he was like 20 when I was in a band with him when I was 16. And I saw a guy who was working to supplement playing these shows, but like working in bars, staying up late, super not good for his health. Do you know what I mean? Like working his ass off, really working just to supplement being in a band. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to make sure I can build something that is going to allow me to supplement it properly instead of like chasing the dragon, as it were. Do you know what I mean? Like really just being like,
against the wall the whole time.
Absolutely. Just wave after wave of financial, like, you know, horror just waving over you. Do you know what I mean? So
just like constant hangover.
Yeah, for sure. Like,
I've been there.
Yeah, and like when I was working in university, like I worked in university all the way through in bars doing that. Because it was kind of the only option. Like I wasn't going to, when I was 16, be like, I'm going to rent a studio. Do you know what I mean? But I did that in university, like working in bars. And I was working 3 times a week in the Moon and like doing like 4 till 4 shifts, like Friday, Saturday, and then 1 in the week. Do you know what I mean? And it is like, it destroys you. Do you know what I mean? It's really, really hard to just even function on a mental level. Do you know what I mean?
Did you know you wanted to work in studios during that, you know, transition period?
Yeah, I think it was early, I think. It was when I was applying for university because I went to go do music tech at university. It was when I was applying for university. I was like, I think I want to do recording again because like I think my dad, for better or for worse, was really hard on the line. Also, that was like he was a musician. He was in like he played drums with the Bay City Rollers in the 80s when they had died a death, like, and they were coming back and they were playing shows in Barry and stuff like that. So I think he was playing shows with like the reanimated corpse of the Bay City Rollers, making no money at all, playing electric fucking drum kit. And he was kind of like, if I ever have a child, I'm going to make sure they can be in the music industry and make money. Do you know what I mean? So from the very moment that he was like, I wanted, like when I was in like year 3 or whatever, and he was like, oh, you should play drums. And I was like, okay. Because I just, you know, if you have kids, you just fill them with your shit, don't you? And then they grow up and then they hate you. He was like, you can, the whole time it was like, you can be a musician, you can do whatever, but you just got to make sure that you're smart about it and you can try and make some money out of it. Do you know what I mean? And that, I'm very fortunate that worked out. For a lot of people, it doesn't work out. And what I think I wanted to caveat, like the last bit about working in a bar as well, all these conversations and the political element of it is that all these conversations are fantastic to talk about, but like there are a lot of people who don't even like I'm just a musician in this situation. I've been really fortunate to get out of that, and I think the thing that influenced my outlook for music from a political perspective as well is thinking about people who don't even have music. Do you know what I mean? And so people that are put in the position of having to work, you know, I've still got friends who work in that bar because they just don't have anything else, because the climate, the economic climate, the situation in our country at the moment hasn't set them up to succeed whatsoever. You know, they're incredibly intelligent people, hardworking people, and they don't have music, they don't have anything. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I think getting sort of experiencing that in a bar was one thing, but also being offered the opportunity by whatever contextual setting I'm in to be able to get out of it was another thing, to be like, God damn, I'm a lucky person. Do you know what I mean? And I think
it makes me like, that solidifies my position as like someone who wants to live in an alternative or subculture, and you realize it doesn't work the way that we're taught it works.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't want to live in a world that's a lie, that's a facade.
Yeah, and I think what you see in like a lot of the political discourse of our day, especially like in terms of people who are like on the left, like when there was the last election happening, there was a lot of conversation that, and I think this is what we're talking about actually contributed to the result of the last election as well, is that a lot of people on the left were talking about these really lofty goals and these really lofty opinions on what we should be doing to better our society. But the hour in our society wasn't actually what was going on with working class people and people in those subcultures. Like, there wasn't any connection with people in those subcultures and people in those societies. It was very much like, we, the divided political class of us, think this is best. Do you know what I mean? And it went the other way for that reason. And I think there's a lot of that in music as well, like increasingly so. Like a lot of people it depends on what level you're speaking about it, obviously, but on an international level, absolutely. I mean, like fucking, like Billie Eilish was homeschooled, and you got to ask yourself why was she allowed to be homeschooled for that long? Do you know what I mean? But even down in just to the UK scene, like the connections that people have from birth means that they're immediately separated from these subcultures and are just brought into the industry. Do you know what I mean? So I think what you mentioned is a really important part of developing like a musical style, and I also think like what's really cool about that is that it comes easier to communities that are perhaps separated from like the big city capital London vibe. Do you know what I mean? Because there are you're basically born into a subculture because you're not immediately in like the hotspot of what is going on. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think it matters who you are, whatever life you've been brought into, whether it's one where you're going to ska gigs with your parents on a Sunday at the local pub,
God forbid,
or if it's somewhere
God
where if you do any other job other than the people around you are doing, then you're marginalized or spoken to like an outsider. Ultimately, like, we just want to feel included.
And
I think for me, that's got a big part of it, right? Because I was very lucky enough to grow up in a small town where there were gigs happening. You say, if people didn't have music, I think all the time, what if those gigs wouldn't have happened? You wouldn't think, oh, I'll start a band, I'll become a music journalist. It just wouldn't be a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me as well, like, it seems super weird, and I'm sure loads of people have this as well, but I never thought about not doing music. And that's like an insane position to be in, because I had these support systems around me, like, like a stable family for a bit. They got divorced, but they needed to. Do you know what I mean? When it's like 7:30 a.m. and I'm in my fucking school uniform outside the house saying, "Mum, I've got a test," and they're throwing stuff at each other, it's kind of like, okay, maybe you guys should get divorced, And but I was, oh no, please, it's hilarious. That's the thing. I think that's another element of like my musical outlook as well, is that it's important to find humor in everything, because we're all okay. Like at the end of it all, like, I'm okay. Like I'm not going to sit here and pretend that my parents' divorce is really hurting me. Do you know, like when Ed Sheeran said that he was like, he watched that episode of South Park that made fun of ginger people and it ruined his life. I was like, yeah, Ed, I'm pretty sure it ruined your life, pal. Yeah. One of like the most successful musicians on the planet. I'm sure it ruined your life. Just that, have some fun, man. Come on. I can't remember what I was saying, but that was it. Yeah, like it was. I didn't even think about it. Do you know what I mean? Because I was in the position of like having support systems there for me, that it was kind of like a guiding hand. Do you know what I mean? It was like something. I came from a sort of community where I wanted to do something, and all my life I've been enabled to do it, which is a pretty phenomenal position to be in. And it's very, very easy, I imagine, to go down that path and just not think about anybody else who perhaps has had to question that. Do you know what I mean? And I think there was a couple of decisions perhaps that maybe changed my perspective on that. And I think going to university in Cardiff was a good thing for that, because there were a lot of people in my university that were from Cardiff, went to school in Cardiff, and just went to uni because they thought it was the right thing to do. And under those circumstances, I could see people who were changing their minds about what they wanted to do, and that was a huge indicator to me that I was like, okay, this isn't like, my life isn't cookie cut across everybody else's. Like, people have inner conflicts and what they actually want to do. A lot of people don't know what they want to do. My stepdad, Gary, in his 60s, probably still doesn't even know what he wants to do. Do you know what I mean? So I have to have some kind of like political, or even if putting it in a musical sense, like musical empathy to people who are not open to the idea that it's like my God-given right to be a musician, because it's not. And it's, do you know what I mean? And it's not anyone's. But I think that's often like a overused kind of remark, or like, you know, like you were born to do it, or I was born to do this, you know, this whole thing. I think that kind of sets aside everybody else's struggle.
Was there a path? Did you, I mean, you mentioned your friend Grant playing in that metal band.
Yeah.
Were there any other people who were setting out a path that you could kind of, you know, see their mistakes, see where they went right, see where they took the right step in the right direction?
Yeah.
You know, could you see a path of like, you know, how you could, of a direction to go in? Because you can see how it's pretty directionless sometimes.
Oh yeah,
you
for
know,
sure. Yeah,
a lot of people are playing in groups and they might be great, but they don't really know where to go, and they're probably still playing, you know, sort of thinly veiled pay-to-play shows, and it feels impossible.
Yeah, I'm in the position as well, being a producer and working with bands from Cardiff, of like seeing that happen a lot. And it's hard for bands because I think there's sorry, this is going to be quite a long answer, but intrinsically in a musician or a creative, there's a tendency to like you get into a band, I think, for there's many reasons, but there's one predominant reason, which is you want to be seen. Like the reason for nobody can willfully say that they don't want to get up on a stage because they don't want to be seen. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think like that's a big part of being in a band. And so with that element already in your brain, a lot of the bands that I work with are always saying, cool, when we finish this, we're going to release it straight away. Do you know what I mean? Because there's a willingness there that it's like, we just want to be seen. We want to get it out there. Do you know what I mean? We want to do that. There's a constant battle there between like doing the right thing and making a career for yourself, and wanting to be seen and appreciated and all this sort of stuff for whatever reason, you know. And that sort of what was that? Why did I start saying that?
Groups that record, bands that record with you, and they say they just want to put out stuff immediately.
Yeah. So they're sort of like battling that dynamic. I started off down that road. I had a really good answer, and it just left. You know, it just left me.
I guess bands lost. You know, where do you know where to go?
Okay, that's the thing. That's what I was going to say. That's good. You're good at your job, man. Yeah, fuck yeah. Okay. So basically, it's like they're constantly battling with that idea. What should we do? Maybe we should take this route, and they commit themselves to one route, and then 5 seconds later they'll find out that some girl on TikTok just made, like, she's on the Jimmy Kimmel show because she just like put a song up on TikTok and it's blown up and this thing's gone insanely crazy. So they're chasing their own tail and doing this whole thing to be like, which way do I go? Do you know what I mean? There's so many routes and paths, and everyone's telling you that this one's the right one and this one's the right one, and this, you know, this is the thing to do. For me personally, it wasn't really that I saw people who were like making mistakes or like seeing people in front of me doing things right and then I would do the same thing. I think I've just been together with a couple of people in my life who have really like they've had the good grace to like hold my hand with me through good and bad times, but like be there with me. Grant Jones was the first person who sort of just introduced me to like playing shows. One really important thing, which is like not giving a shit about what people think about you or your music, and just going out and making the music you want to make. That was really, really important. And then I had a pair of brothers, Joel Hurst and Ethan Hurst, who I was in a band called Tibet with, like an indie band. Joel especially really introduced me to the idea of songwriting and how to write a song, because whether you like it or not, there is an industry there and you do have to feed into an industry, and when you're writing a song you kind of have to think about certain parameters to be able to like work it out, honest within yourself of course, but like there are certain parameters that you need to feed into. You got to release a single, do you know what I mean? You got to do this, you got to do that. He really introduced me to that sort of thing and took me on a journey through, like, we were kind of like a little bit successful in the industry in that band, and he was there with me and sort of walked me through it, and it was a real partnership that we were like really helping each other through. And then it didn't really work out because we didn't really have the numbers. We were going out on tour. We just didn't sell any tickets. You know, it happens. We were devastated at the time, but it makes sense. But then you learn from those experiences as well. I think I was like 19, from when I was like 19 till 21.
You think you're old at that age, don't you?
Oh man, I thought I was it, man. I was like, I'm going to get a mortgage next week. Do you know what I mean? I thought I had it together. Like,
did you get signed? So that's a bit of a divisive, loaded question, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we did a couple bits with Alcopop, you know.
Yeah, great label.
Yeah. Jack from Alcopop was great. And again, like I think he was another person that I kind of underestimated in my whole journey of it all. It was like a really understanding person and really willing to accept like the kind of gaps in our knowledge of the industry and that sort of thing to really take us on and fill us in. And I, like you said, like I think he exists in that sort of area of subculture that people don't necessarily appreciate. And people, for example, in like the higher ups in Cardiff Council don't really see those people as people of worth who contribute to the fertilization of like true talent. You know what I mean? But yeah, so he was great as well. And so yeah, we kind of did a bit of stuff with him. We had management.
So management's a funny one.
It is a funny one.
Because I was always like, who the fuck's going to manage us? Me. I'm not going to I do the work. Thank you very much.
Yeah. That's the thing. I went from being in a band with Grant where we didn't need that, and I was like, I'm going to do it all. It's all cool. Like, I want to be in control of all that stuff. To then being in a band with a manager and being like, oh, you actually need this. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, what I learned from that is that so much is already, like, because the way that the industry is set up, so much is already expected of you as a musician on day one of releasing your first record. Like, so like people always perceive you releasing your first record as the beginning of your musical lifetime, when in actual fact you've already supplied so much. Like in our case, we had to have a full, what we gave to Communion, which is totally our decision, and so I'm not going to put the blame on them. I'm not saying that it's any harm to them because we came to them with this proposal, but like we had a studio, we had a whole record ready to go, bunch of recordings, knew how to make the recordings ourselves, had been playing around funding our own gigs, had found ourselves a manager, had made all the videos ourselves, financed all the videos, that sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean? Working our asses off to do all of that, and you have to provide that to an industry professional. Do you know what I mean? So I think a lot of the times there's like little consideration in terms of how much work you have to do just to get to day one. Do you know what I mean? To that position. So for me, it makes sense that people would want a manager after that, especially now when the industry, the zeitgeist, everything is telling you, now you got to be a content creator. Like now you got to have a podcast. Now you got to be on TikTok. Now you could learn how to dance. You got to learn how to dance. If you don't know how to do ballet, you're never going to make it. Do you know what I mean? Like this is the social pressure to be that sort of band, or act against it, but act against it so convictingly that you deny all your own mental observations about it and really stick to your guns. It's an incredibly stressful situation to be in. So I can completely understand why anybody would not entirely fold, but just be like, I want to get a manager as soon as I can. I started being a sound guy, like a live sound guy, because there was a bit more, we didn't have a space and stuff. So I was sort of doing that. And then we were in a transitionary period when I was in Tibet where we were starting again after that tour failed. And so we took like a year to like write new songs. But in that time as well, I started writing Buzzard stuff. And I was just like, because I was living with my mother and I was like very upset. And I was just like, I'm going to do something for me. I'm going to do something that I want to do that is totally me. I don't have to do it with anybody else. I don't have to share it with anybody else. So I was recording for a while in Joel and Ethan's house, like before they would wake up. I'd come in like really early, like greet their parents as they went to work, as they went out the door. And then I'd set a bunch of mics up, record a bunch of drums, and then pack it all down by the time they woke up. And then they woke up and we'd have Tibet practice or the new band practice. And so after like about 6 weeks of doing that, I was like, I'm really fucking fed up of setting mics up and down. So we should really try and find a space. It'd be really good for all of us. So this was the space that I'm in now that we all actually found. And we managed to come here. So I was doing live sound. I think I was still working in the Moon. I worked for Deliveroo for a little bit. That was one of the most miserable experiences I've ever had in my life. I don't wish that upon anyone. And that is another industry that has completely exploded that I think just does awful stuff to people. Like I remember coming back to my girlfriend's house halfway through a shift because it was pissing rain so much to put carrier bags on my feet because the rain was just I was just soaked completely through. Do you know what I mean? Also,
you were on bicycle.
I was on a bike, yeah. I had a shit fucking bike that weighed about fucking 2 tons that I bought from this guy in fucking Grangetown in Cardiff. And once I was cycling down fucking St. Mary Street, the main street in Cardiff, they got these massive plant pots, right, made of granite. And I was fucking going, and I turned to go right, and my handlebars went right, but the wheel stayed in the same place because it had come loose as I was riding around for like 9 hours a fucking day. I went straight into the plant pot and I did a front flip over it. And of course, it's the main street in Cardiff, nighttime, all the lads, all that fucking, I was just awful. So I did that for a little bit. I had the good fortune of working for my father for a little bit, doing a bit of construction consultancy work, which I love my father. I love him to pieces. I hated the fucking job. It was fucking awful. I had to basically cold call universities. Not a big vibe. Nobody wanted to speak to me. It was very strange. I was trying to get on a level with like 50-year-old white guys, do you know what I mean? Which is just like a strange thing to be doing every day. Like, hey, Andy, how are the kids? It's, oh, I forgot you hate your kids. Sorry, I'll call back next week. Do you know what I mean? So I did that for a little bit and then managed to get a little bit in more to the live sound thing. And then once I started doing Buzzard stuff, I was really fortunate that when we were releasing stuff, it was stuff that I had recorded. So I kind of had a kind of CV to go on. So when people were coming in, they were coming in for that reason. And I think that's the same way it works today, really. It's kind of like a cyclical thing where we put a song out and then people enjoy it and they're like, who recorded it? And I'm like, it's me. You should come to my studio and all that sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean? So it works very well. The band services my production work. My production work services the band. It's great. It's a really self-serving economy. It's very fun.
Did you find it quite straightforward to like take that seriously enough to kind of do your books and fucking be serious about it?
Yeah, I'm pretty bad at doing my books, but I do get them done. That's the thing. I think, again, I think it's important to have that. It's really bad because these are the things that never get taught to you in school. Do you know what I mean? And I have sort of just stumbled through learning these things as I've gone along. And I think even at the studio, like trying to register as a legitimate business and stuff, we've been hit with loads of fines that we've had to pay that we just didn't know. We had to get fucking somebody to collect our rubbish. I didn't know you had to do that as a fucking company. Like you have to get like Biffa to come round to come and get your rubbish, and it costs so much money a month. It was just like insane. All these things, you know what I mean? So I kind of have stumbled through that, but to a point where now it's kind of okay. It's kind of like when you're growing up and you're like, your parents tell you to tidy your room, and when you first have to do that shit, you're like, for fuck's sake, this is awful. I fucking hate it. But then when you become an adult, it becomes like a really kind of like soft, nagging pain, as opposed to like a knife in the chest. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's how we all live until we eventually retire, which with this government will probably be when we're fucking 95 and we just fucking die. So, taxes kind of become about like that, once you get into them, the pain gets a little bit softer, and then I'll be moving everything over to the Cayman Islands next year anyway, so it's totally fine.
Love it, Tom. Well, to end with, go on. What jobs? What side jobs would you love to work in the future? What's on there? Has anything come across your mind?
You know what? Like I've always loved people who work with their hands, like contractors, plumbers, carpenters, all those sorts of people. I think they're not really appreciated enough in what they do and how easy they make people's lives, and how like skillful and intelligent they are, like how intelligent you have to be in a tactile and like a really real tangible way to know how to build things and how to set things right and like feel and touch things and get a feeling from what you're working with. And I've been doing some very, like, I swear to God, like I am like level 1. I'm like white belt, I think they would say in Taekwondo, at doing anything. But I've been replacing our kitchen and doing some DIY stuff. And I was like, if I had somebody teaching me this, I would love to do it. It's a very satisfying job to do, especially when you clean everything up at the end and it's all done. Like I would love to get into like carpentry or like whatever. I'm not entirely sure, but something that's like, being a producer, you do kind of work with your hands, but it's a lot of it is in the digital realm and a lot of it is in computers, and it's not like it used to be. So I'd love to do something very physical, a bit more physical. That would be really fun.
Nice one, Tom. You've been great.
Thank you very much, man. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
So there was Thomas Rees of Buzzard Buzzard Buzzard. Cheers for listening this week. Back next is Sparrer.
I've been working all day for me mate on the side, running around like a blue-ass fly. I've been working all day for me mate. Every bleeding minute I've been on the go, up and down the ladder like a fiddler's elbow. I've been working all day for me mate.
This is a Mighty Moon Media podcast.